It is my great honor to be sitting with my next guest, my dear friend, Sarah Harvie. I was introduced to Sarah through yoga. We're in the same world. And then I went away to Indonesia to run a training. And anyone that knows me knows I love coffee. And because I was so obsessed with the needs of my group, codependent, I only drank instant coffee. So every morning I'd wake up and make an instant coffee. Anyway, Sarah reached out to me halfway through my program and was like, let's meet for a coffee, a real one. But it was this instant spark of knowing, like I had known her before. She had such great insight. She was doing a Kundalini training, and she was waking up at 3 a.m. to chant for 7 hours. It was completely outrageous, but it was so cool to hear her experience. She is a whitewater guide. She is a Kundalini yoga instructor. She runs yoga nidra trainings, a massage therapist, so many things, and one of my nearest and dearest. So thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, Erin. I've been listening to every episode of your podcast and loving how you're not afraid to touch dark subjects, uncomfortable stuff. And we're continuing in that vein for this podcast. This is the kind of conversations that most of us like to avoid at all costs to make it seem like we've got everything together. And it's very poignant that we're talking about codependency and our meeting in Bali, because it was a really beautiful friendship cementing moment. And I also shared with you that morning one of the most striking moments of that 30-day training. So we were in the hall from 4 a.m. till 6 p.m. chanting, doing different breath work and yoga techniques. And it changed my brain. It changed my life. The first morning we're all seated in the open air hall, and the teacher walks in. She's a former professional ballerina, so tall, blonde, poised, beautiful. She commands the room. She walks in. She stands at the front and scans the room and begins by saying, I'm going to guess that your life didn't turn out how it planned. Because if your life had turned out how it planned, you would not be here at 4 a.m. chanting. You would be down the beach surfing and drinking Mai Tais. And look at this, I'm here with you. So acknowledging her own wounding, her own healing. And then that she also segued into, you could have selected to do this training 1 weekend a month over the next year. And the fact that you chose to consolidate this into 30 days also is indicative of your nature as a seeker of intensity, which probably has been your medicine as well as your gift.
Beautiful.
Erin, to get us going here, I'd love to share a clip from a well-known author in the self-help world, perhaps not a well-known author in your world, Melanie Beattie. So Melanie wrote this book in the 1980s. She was going through a divorce. She was collecting welfare at the time, and she had the courage essentially to speak again about something that had been swept under the rug.
In my group, I saw people who felt responsible for the entire world, but they refused to take responsibility for leading and living their own lives. I saw people who constantly gave to others, but didn't know how to receive. I saw people give until they were angry, exhausted, and emptied of everything. I saw some give until they gave up. I even saw one woman give and suffer so much that she died of old age and natural causes at age 33.
Sarah Harvie's with me today to talk about and dive into this idea of codependency and how to heal. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Erin. This is a timely conversation. Valentine's Day weekend can be this really amazing heightened weekend for people. It can also be a super low weekend for people, whether they're in a relationship or they're single. I'm getting into some societal comparisons. And so I think this is a raw, honest, important conversation to have in a time that's easy to be hallmarked.
Tell me, what is the definition of a codependent?
Well, thank you for having me, Erin. I'm really excited to be here. And the definition of codependency, or should I say my understanding of codependency, so back in the 1960s is when support groups began for women who were often married to alcoholics, and it's now worldwide, and it's for men, women, any and all genders. It's no longer sort of this stereotypical societal thing where one person is over-functioning for someone else in their life, and their self-worth and identity comes from over-functioning.
Wow. And I have spent so many of my relationships and so much of my life doing this. And for me, how it shows up as I'll walk into a room and I first of all sense into how Sarah's doing. And if I can tell that she's feeling a little bit off or uncomfortable, it becomes my mission to make her feel better. And whether or not she is in a good state, it's just an interpretation of what I think she's going through. And so I'm in there like a dirty shirt without even giving her space just to be.
And one of the most challenging pieces for me in codependent recovery has been in that moment where I am feeling into Erin and feeling into what's going on to Erin, is to flip that mirror and to go back and actually feel into what am I feeling in this room right now, what am I avoiding feeling, and by enmeshing into Erin, I can avoid these uncomfortable feelings that I'm having in this room.
We talked about this earlier about when I had my car accident, and I'm in the ER, I'm waiting to find out about my arm, I'm in and out of scans, I have a terrible concussion, my son's at the children's hospital, I don't know how he's doing, and the nurse comes in and I can tell she's in a bad mood, so I start asking her like about her job and about her shifts and about her love life, and I'm honestly near death, and I am asking this woman and seeing if I can, make her feel good. And it was such a aha moment for me that I had a problem. And Sarah had mentioned to me when I brought that up that it's such in the nature of a codependent to avoid intense feelings.
That's it's amazing how much came through for you in that accident, and we're very happy you're still here, and Mika's still here. And that you're able, there was a lot of things that came to light in there, a lot of patterns, and some of the cool or strengths of codependent behavior is this over-functioning. Mm-hmm. So we get in society, you get a lot of positive feedback for codependent tendencies. So I'm trying to avoid over-identifying anyone as a codependent, but these tendencies, so that you're upbeat and over-functioning, and easy ways to identify people with these tendencies is they are making stuff happen in the world, not just for them, but for folks around them, and they're elevating others with them. So it's a really powerful trait, and often the flip side or the dark side where it's playing out to their detriment is in their personal life and in those intimate relationships where they're really good at giving, functioning, creating great things for that person, job opportunities, friends, relations, but they're blocking themselves off from receiving or from allowing that other person to live out their own karma, their own destiny, their own dharma.
It's interesting you say that, because when you're in it and you're giving and you're giving and you're giving, what do you want? What do you need? I found personally, or find, that then I get animosity and I feel really upset that my needs aren't being met. And yet I've never stipulated that I had needs, so they probably assume I don't have any. So there's the giving is not with clean intention. I'm giving, but I'm giving because I want you to love me.
Yeah, and your identity is wrapped up in this idea that is love, that the other person needs you as opposed to wants you.
Yeah.
And I love Melanie Beattie refers to in her book that she can identify a codependent within the first 5 minutes. They are quickly going to shine a spotlight on you. They're probably going to make you feel like $1 million, but that there's a hook in there. They're trying to validate or show you their worthiness by offering you often unwanted advice or suggestions to help you see their worth as in, oh, you need me. Look how much great advice that person gave me. As opposed to being a neutral witness and listening and thinking that you are an independent vessel and that you are going to find your own, those answers within you. So holding a neutral space for you to find your own answers.
Mm-hmm. People would say to me, you don't need to take a program for coaching because you're so naturally inclined to do it. But what was so fascinating when I took my program is that it is never about leading somebody anywhere or giving them any advice. So it speaks to that everyone has a high coach within. Everybody knows what they want. And to be bombarded with advice and information, in fact, takes away from their inner voice and their North Star, their compass.
And that they're recreating, they're converting that codependency perhaps from their intimate relationship to you. And so there's going to be that built-in resentment, because if they made a decision and it didn't work out as they hoped, then there's that resentment towards you. Well, I listened to your advice, and how did you not know what was best for me?
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that. And I know for me personally, I recognize this pattern in myself in my marriage, actually. And my therapist gave me a book. It was Melanie Beattie's Codependency No More. And basically it talks about this idea of self-love deficit, like a codependent. And you might have varying degrees of it, but at the heart of it is a feeling like you are not lovable. And so you need to show somebody or offer somebody so many things to prove that you're lovable. And when I recognized it in myself, it was such a light bulb moment. And I saw it everywhere I went. In my teaching, in my family, in my friendships, in my parenting even.
So how do you meet yourself with compassion in seeing those patterns? And so instead of continuing to label all the places where you're messed up, or, oh, I outsourced love there. I gave my students permission to value the class by saying whether it was good or bad, as opposed to letting the offering be neutral and not need anything from my students. So the difference, or the place I think where the learning comes in, is how can I be self-compassionate to myself? And looking back on childhood, and it's not that your childhood was bad or your parents did anything wrong, but at a certain level, somewhere along the way you figured out how to anticipate your parents' needs, your siblings' needs, your grandma's needs when she was visiting, and to help take care of them. And that part is beautiful, except when we start negating our own needs. And so as we're going through this process, and we both have had this conversation before where we've identified as recovering from codependency, in recovery. So where do I see these moments where I've felt really uncomfortable, and so instead I've spent all my energy focusing on fixing someone else to feel better about myself, and meeting myself with self-compassion there, as opposed to beating myself up or over-identifying, oh, here I go again, being codependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just made me have a flashback of how many times something occurs between you and I, or me and someone else, and I stew and I dwell on whether Sarah's okay. And I think it leads the way to being so afraid of having conflict. And I think in conflict, in disagreement, you come to a crossroads, and that's a really important place to go. And when I avoid conflict, or I say something I mean, but I immediately want to fix it because I know you're uncomfortable, there is no way for us to build trust or even a foundation, because otherwise it's a little bit phony. It's just me pretending everything's okay always. And I remember when I had my child, I had a section, and I remember just deciding beforehand that my partner at the time, I was like, you will not wake up in the night. You will not wake up in the night. There's no need. I'm the one, I have the breasts, so I need to feed the baby. So I immediately gave my power away and never asked him to wake up, but secretly I was resentful. I had a section, I was tired, it hurt. I just wanted a little support, and yet I never asked.
That was one of my greatest motivations for starting to heal in this journey, was reading in Melanie's book that what happens is when the addict or the lower functioning person decides and commits to get better, they often do see a really high rate of success. Yet what happens is the codependent doesn't heal. Suddenly they don't know how to function when the other person is meeting their own needs, because their whole identity is wrapped up in fixing or helping the other person. So the level of resentment or anger that's within you or myself is so deep that they can't move forward. And when I read that was a real light bulb moment of I need to begin this journey, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Another interesting part to understand is actually the healing process can be more painful for the codependent. It can actually create more physical pain, more physical symptoms of withdrawal than the drug addiction. And there's going to be a lot of dark nights of the soul. There's going to be a lot of crawling out of your skin and just wanting to avoid and escape. But on the other side of that is you.
Oh, so articulately put. And I think it's really important to know that you can get better. You get better healed, and it's really subtle. It's noticing conversations and how they leave you feeling. For me personally, I've been playing with it in my parenting, and just noticing when my son gets sad, how I immediately want to fix it. And instead of that, I'm now giving him the space to cry, to be angry, before we even go into fix-it mode. Because if we're going in fix-it mode, I'm telling my son, don't have an emotion. And I believe that's why I became codependent, or maybe it was just my path, was because I think emotions are uncomfortable. And not that our parents don't want us to feel them, but I know for my son, I don't want him to be sad. And yet, sadness is such a big part of being human. It's the spectrum of emotion.
And that beautiful moment of self-compassion there for you as a mother, that your deepest desire is that your baby doesn't feel pain, and how beautiful that is. And that instead the greater gift you're giving him is an ability to navigate life, because you can't protect him from pain. And it's the same thing in that moment of the breakup and those horrific days, weeks, months after.
Years.
Years. I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, in a sense, because it is physical withdrawal. It is what I would imagine an insane detox or withdrawal to be. Yet somewhere in there, going through that, you start to understand that you can make yourself happy, that you don't need that other person. Doesn't mean we're not interdependent, we don't need others, but that gift to give yourself in this life, that you can make yourself happy.
And that it has nothing to do with whether someone else loves you. That it's all like, the more independent I get and the more I source my self-worth from within, the easier my life is to navigate. It's no longer, did Sarah like what I said? But one of the most profound things that you ever said to me was, be neutral. So if I walk into a space and I want Becky to bind, and I want Sarah to do a handstand, and I want Larry to think I'm cute, my message is shallow. And to be neutral means I go in and I teach from a high place that I believe is the best I can offer to every person in the room. And it's not about whether they like me or get anything out of it. And I take it into everywhere. Neutrality with my coaching clients, neutrality with my friends, and takes the onus, the pressure off me.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful practice. And if we think back to relationships we've been in, the gift that we could have given that other person by holding neutral, as opposed to needing them to see our worth and how we just gave away our power and our happiness.
And there's agenda. Like when I'm giving you feedback, when I see you're in pain and I want you out of it, I have an agenda. Like, this is how you'll heal. Do this. Stop drinking. Do this. Read this book. And that has nothing to do with Sarah taking the ownership upon herself to get better, to be happy.
Yeah, and it reinforces that image the person struggling with in that moment, that they are not capable of fulfilling their own dharma, that they need someone else. So they're going to transfer that feeling they were having with that intimate partner onto you in that coach or yoga teacher. Well, now Erin will show me the way. And that's where we've gotten into trouble in all these lineages with putting all our belief and trust and our inner compass onto the guru.
Oh, so true. The one word I want to point out is dharma, and the meaning of the word dharma. So dharma is a rule, it's a moral code, but it's deeper than that in that we have this innate image within ourselves, like an acorn, of a life that is meant to unfold for us. And it's unique because each of us see the world totally differently. So when we're on our path to fulfilling our dharma, it definitely can't be what Sarah thinks I should do and what Cindy thinks I'm good at. It has to be sourced from within. So I'm curious for you personally, what have been some techniques to noticing the tendency to go out when you should be going in?
Awesome question. I find the old default neural pathway will start to play out. So I'll run into someone, they'll offer me unsolicited advice as I'm sharing about the new space I'm living in, about a retreat that's coming up, and I'll notice myself later looping to the feedback they gave me. And I'll start to notice that there's almost a need to correct them or to explain or justify myself. Like I want to follow up with a text. And then I redirect that discomfort to myself. What am I avoiding right now? Mm-hmm. And it's a lot easier to do it with those small little 2-minute interactions than it was in those initial stages of breakup. And I keep coming back to those stages, thinking about folks right now that are maybe in an unhealthy situation and thinking about leaving and struggling to find the courage, knowing the pain is going to be real. And so in those initial days, do whatever you can to get through it. In those initial months, surround yourself with support and structure. And then later on, it's more fun too, because it's these little interactions, so I can play with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. For me personally, what's been super beneficial is to not be in a relationship. But I definitely notice it within maybe my family unit where I used to take on things and want to fix them. And I just, in the moment, I drop it. Rose Reader says, stop, drop, and roll. Mm-hmm. So the moment I want to take on your problems, your troubles, I stop, drop, and roll. And the other thing is when I stop, drop, and roll, I also put the power back in your hands to say, Sarah knows how to decorate her kitchen. You know, Sarah knows about a retreat. I mean, she's been doing this longer than me. She knows why she did what she did. And it's empowering. It reminds people that they have what it takes to do what needs to be done.
I'd love to throw that question back to you, Erin. What about you in some of those initial days of breakup, in those initial stages of pain? What were some survival techniques for you?
Well, first of all, it felt like I was dying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was having panic attacks and how will I survive without this person? I thought I was dying.
And it's real.
Oh my God, is it ever real? But I think it takes that shake you awake to make you realize this is not healthy. My relationships. So my mom had said to me when I was in my marriage, she said, you're going to develop a mental illness if you're not careful. And that struck a chord. I was like, what do you mean? She said, you're pretending everything's okay when it's not. And she's a woman that's like, that's not good, that's good. Like she's not afraid to express her needs. And that really hit me hard, where I was like, something's off and it's not him, it's me. So when I started to really look at this pattern, books were really helpful. Melanie Beattie's book was really helpful. Therapy was very helpful. One thing Nikki Fortin taught me was it's a triangle effect. So I tell Sarah she looks beautiful. And my intention at the top of the triangle is I tell Sarah that she's beautiful, right? But from one angle, it's because I want her to like me. I want, it's just like a power thing. But from the other angle, it's that I genuinely just think she looks beautiful. So they're both the same result, but my intention is very different. So in the early days, I just started to pay attention to my dark agenda. Why am I saying what I'm doing? Is it so that you'll like me? Or is it because I genuinely am like, damn, you look beautiful? Self-awareness, knowing that people don't need me. I don't want anyone to need me. I don't want my students to need me. I don't even want my son to need me. I want people to be so independent that I'm just this add-on for their life.
Yeah, and then you welcome in that interdependent love as opposed to that codependent love.
Yeah.
When they see you, it elevates them, but they don't need you to value their own self.
Yeah. For you personally, how did you know? Was there like a moment when you're like, ooh, I'm getting better at this?
Great question. I think that like many of these things, it's a realization later. Oh, I only obsessed about that for a day. I wasn't a month later still wanting to loop back to Susie, who gave me some unsolicited feedback a month ago, and let her know why my decision was my decision. Hey, I only thought about that for a day. So in hindsight, you start to notice that the healing was incremental and subtle.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me personally, it is to unhook quicker. Someone expresses a drama or something occurring in their life, and I want to get entangled in the drama, and then I just unhook. And I'm like, no, that's not your circus. Those aren't your monkeys. Like, get out. And that for me is quicker, and oh my God, like inner peace. Isn't that what we all want?
And the next day you're not following up with them. So what happened with that? You're not, sparking. Doesn't mean you don't care about them and you're not there for them, but you're there for their higher self, not for that lower vibration where you want to feed it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to see how much I care because I followed up what happened with the drama. And it's way juicier to distract yourself with someone else's drama than it is to deal with those uncomfortable feelings within.
And, our teacher said, we want to get back to the center of our center. And right now with everything happening in the world, it's like politics, COVID, Sally's breakup, so-and-so's abuse. It's so easy to hook out, and it feels reverent. It feels like godly, like we're helping, that we're making a difference. But when we hook out, we're losing the center of our center. And the center of our center becomes Sarah. The center of our center becomes our husband. And it's important to care and to love. The problem with it becomes when you have no idea what the heck you even feel anymore.
A big piece of healing for me too was unhooking from that societal reinforcement, that seeming to care by hooking into people's drama. Oh, so-and-so, they're so amazing. They're always checking in with me. That story.
Yeah. Yeah, and you feel it when people do it. I feel it now when people do it. I'm like, they are addicted to drama, and they almost look for drama. I used to do that. I used to live off it. I was like, I am so sad Beverly Hills 90210 is done. I gotta find it everywhere I go.
And it's feeding the hungry ghost, right? Because when I was in the depths of codependency, there was nothing I wanted to avoid more than that feeling when there was no drama, no hook, that feeling of discomfort within me. Run far and fast, find out the biggest drama around and hook in. And now that I can sit comfortably and quietly with myself. There is an amazing study where they put people alone in a jail cell, and the only thing that they left in there with them was a electrical shock machine. And the person would sit there, and then eventually discomfort, boredom, ultimately what do we want to avoid doing? Meditating, sitting with ourselves, sitting with that discomfort of our own emotions. And so eventually boredom would overtake, and people would go over and they would electrocute themselves. And they're like, oh, that was awful. I do not want to repeat that. And what would happen a little while later? They would go back and over electrocute themselves. So inflict pain to avoid sitting. So if we can find these ways to get through those initial stages of breaking up with that person, basically going through the cocaine withdrawal. Mary Oliver has been, for many of us, such an amazing inspiration, and her poems and her nature inspiration have helped me navigate through so many rough waters. And this poem in particular really helped me navigate the healing journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voice behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do. Determined to save the only life that you could save.
That's beautiful.
The journey, Mary Oliver.
Yep. The only life, the only thing. We control so very little, but is so crucial that we take care of number one. And in the sense of the word of like unhook, that drama is only keeping you up at night and keeping you from going in to explore the treasure of what is within. Every great sage says it, and they wouldn't tell us to go there if we shouldn't. They're like, go in. But you're right, I'd rather electrocute myself than go in. Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah is a fabulous healer. My God, where do I even start? She does distance healing. Her hands-on touch is amazing, massage therapy. She runs yoga nidra trainings, and she teaches. How can people find you?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a website. And one of the beautiful gifts of the pandemic is that more and more of my work is virtual. So online one-on-one sessions as well as trainings and workshops are happening all the time. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to connect.
Beautiful. I'll put that in the show notes if you want to get a hold of her. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here, and keep shining your bright light.